had exploded with tourists and summer residents. Main Street was packed with visitors shopping or on their way to the beach or just enjoying their time in the sun. She smiled. Only a few months ago, she'd been a visitor to this town. But now she was home, in the town of her mother's birth, a community about an hour east of Wilmington on the North Carolina coast. She spent all of her time with her aunt, cousins, and friends, some old, some new, and she couldn't be happier. Her gaze went to the street lined with multicolored shops with jeweled-toned awnings, buildings that had been standing for over 200 years. Her world now consisted of clean white sidewalks dotted with wrought iron benches, large pots of flowers, shade trees, and sea breezes. So much character, so much history, packed in a small, unassuming area, and she loved it. Loved being a part of a small town with all of its eccentricities and quirks. Like a parade, she thought with a thrill of delight. An actual small-town parade. She could still see the red, white, and blue confetti that littered the streets after last week's 4th of July parade down the town's historic center. American flags had waved from every shop front, and Alex smiled, recalling how many locals and tourists alike had filled the downtown sidewalks to watch the local high school band march by, along with 15 or so other floats. Alex laughed, thinking about how her cousin Minka, who had joined her in the crush of people on the sidewalk, oohed and awed over the participants in the parade like it was her first time seeing such an event.
"Excuse me, miss,"
a customer said, tapping her on the shoulder, interrupting her reverie.
"Those teas I've heard so much about."
"Our Keep It Kool-Aid?" Alex guessed. When the man nodded, she pointed him in the right direction with a smile. Botanica, the herbal apothecary Alex worked at, was crowded with customers. It was one of the reasons it was so difficult to restock the shelves this morning. Too many people in the shop, but what a wonderful problem for a business to have. With a sigh of contentment, Aleksandra Daniels, or Alex as she was known to her family and friends, turned away from the window and began making her way back to her shelves. Still lost in thought, she marveled that only 3 months earlier she'd quit her job in Manhattan as a risk analyst at a Fortune 500 company, relocated down south, and begun working with her Aunt Lydia in their family business. This was the same family, her mother's family, that her recently deceased father had forbade her to see. 20 years had passed since she'd last spent a summer in Bellamy Bay, playing with her younger cousin Minka, who helped her own mother run the family business, and Minka's older sister Camila, who was a police officer in town. Of course, now she thought she understood why her father had been so reluctant for her to see them after her mother died. They had secrets he didn't want her to be a part of.
"You can only believe in what you see,"
her father had told her over and over again.
"Anything else is fairy tales."
But that was the thing. Once Alex finally returned to Bellamy Bay, she'd discovered that fairy tales were kind of true, and the world as she knew it was not as it seemed. For example, the world was made up of magicals and mundanes. Magicals were people who had certain abilities and powers, while mundanes were your everyday garden-variety human. And Alex and her mother and aunt and cousins? Well, let's just say they weren't mundane, not by a long shot. They were, in fact, descended from a real mermaid, the same one featured in Poland's famous myth about the Mermaid of Warsaw. Alex's mother's family had immigrated to North Carolina from Poland generations ago. But before she'd moved to Bellamy Bay, she'd never heard of that myth, and she certainly hadn't known she was descended from a mermaid. Back at the shelves, she noticed the shelf was filled and the crate was gone. "I finished up," Minka telepathed to her. "I had a break at the counter." Alex looked around the shop and saw her cousin grinning at her from behind the register. She was ringing up a customer and having a telepathic conversation with Alex at the same time. Now that, Alex thought, takes